All right, welcome back to the Roundup. It's great to have you with us again as we continue with our new video format for Spotify and YouTube. And wow, what a week! The biggest story, and I mean the biggest, just dropped yesterday. So you know what? Let's just get straight into it. So, Canada's top spy chief basically just laid all his cards on the table. And let me tell you, it is a very tense hand. In his big annual speech, the director of CSIS, that's Canada's intelligence agency, gave what might be the most blunt, no holds barred assessment of the threats we're facing that I have heard in a long time. It's like he was shouting from the rooftops. The old rules of the game, they're gone. Okay, so first up, let's talk about the alarm bells that CSIS is ringing because they are ringing them loudly. And the clarity here is, well, it's pretty striking. The CSIS director, Dan Rogers, he did not mince words. He came right out and named what he's calling the Big Four. You've got China and Russia, who he says are really ramping up their espionage game in the Arctic, and you know how critical that region is becoming. Then there's Iran. He revealed that their intelligence services have been targeting people right here in Canada, and that CSIS has actually had to step in and disrupt several plots that could have turned lethal. Yeah. And finally, India got called out for what's known as transnational repression. Think, spying on diaspora communities or even threatening activists' families back home. It's heavy stuff. But here's the real kicker, the part that affects so many of us directly. This isn't just about spies and government buildings in Ottawa anymore. Oh no. CSIS made it crystal clear that the new front lines are our private sector and our academic institutions, our boardrooms, our university labs. He's basically saying they've become the new battlegrounds. Okay, so that's the threat picture. But believe it or not, it's not all doom and gloom. It's not just about playing defense. In the middle of all this geopolitical chaos, Canada is actually starting to play offense, looking to flip a global challenge into a massive opportunity. So what's going on? Well, you look south of the border, and the U.S. is making some major budget cuts at huge science agencies. We're talking NASA, the National Institutes of Health. That's causing a ton of disruption to research that's been going on for decades. But where there's disruption, there's opportunity, right? And Canada is stepping right into that gap, basically putting up a giant sign that says, hey, top scientists, we're stable, we're well-funded, come on over. And it's not just talk. Take the University of Toronto, for example. They are putting serious cash on the table. They've already poached 3 top-tier scholars from Stanford and MIT. And get this, they've just announced a $24 million initiative to recruit 100 postdoctoral fellows. They're offering them a package of around $100,000 each in salary and research funds. I mean, that is an aggressive strategic play to capitalize on that brain drain from the States. Of course, it's a lot easier to attract the best and brightest when you're already doing world-class work, right? It's not just about giving people an escape route, it's about offering them a better place to do their groundbreaking research. And Canadian research is absolutely hitting new heights. Just look at the University of Waterloo. 15 of their researchers were just named to the highly cited list. That means their work is in the top 1% globally. The top 1%. We're talking about game-changing fields like clean energy and food security. That kind of excellence is a magnet for more talent. And it's not just about poaching individuals either. Canada is also busy forging new alliances. This new partnership with Denmark on quantum research, it's a perfect example. The plan has 2 parts. First, lead the world in this incredibly critical tech. And second, just as important, secure the supply chains for it by working with trusted, like-minded allies. All right, so let's zoom out a bit, because Canada's security concerns and these strategic moves, they're not happening in a vacuum. Not at all. They're part of a much bigger, coordinated shift happening across all of our Western allies. You can see the pattern pretty clearly. The UK? They're actively scaling back science collaboration with China, pulling out of sensitive areas like robotics. The EU? They're thinking about banning Chinese institutions from key parts of their massive Horizon Europe Research Fund. And down in Australia, their spy chief just put out a warning that Chinese state hackers are actively trying to get into their critical infrastructure, telecom, power grids, you name it. It's a unified front, a real hardening of defenses. And this isn't just about high-level policy papers anymore. These security worries are starting to show up in the very technology we use every single day. Which brings us to a pretty wild question. Could your city bus be shut down remotely from the other side of the world? Sounds like a spy movie plot, right? But it's a real question the UK government is asking right now. They've launched a full-on investigation into hundreds of electric buses made by the Chinese company Yutong. The fear is that these buses, driving around British cities, could potentially be disabled from afar. It's just a stark reminder of how these big geopolitical risks can trickle all the way down to our daily commute. But while governments are all focused on these big external threats from other countries, there's a totally different kind of crisis brewing inside the world of academia. This isn't a threat of espionage, it's a threat of things eroding from within. This quote from the head of the European Research Council just nails it. She talks about this creeping reduction of freedom, a web of incentives that's choking off scientific independence. So what is this web she's talking about? Well, it's that constant demand for scientists to show immediate impact. It's the insane pressure to only publish in a handful of top journals. It's the insecure career paths that make researchers afraid to take risks on truly fundamental, long-term discovery. And it's the fact that they're spending way too much time filling out grant applications instead of, actually doing research. It's a system that's accidentally strangling the very creativity it's supposed to foster. Now, if the pressure in Europe is like a subtle, creeping web, in the United States, it's way less subtle. It's an all-out political brawl. You've got this incredible split. On one side, you have an institution like Cornell University that essentially made a deal with the government to get its federal funding back. The catch? They have to adopt the government's interpretation of civil rights laws and use official memos that are opposed to diversity programs. But on the other side, you have students and faculty at more than 100 universities protesting this very thing. They're arguing that tying funding to a specific political agenda just completely undermines the whole point of an independent university. Okay, we've talked about state threats, de-risking, internal crises, but our final story this week brings a really fascinating, almost counterintuitive twist to this whole narrative.
Yeah, just when you think the entire story is about separating, de-risking, building digital walls between the West and China, the free market comes along and throws a massive curveball.
And that curveball is a full-blown price war in the world of AI. See, everyone thinks of the big US models from places like OpenAI as the gold standard, premium, high quality, but also high cost. But while all eyes are on them, Chinese AI models are quietly flooding Silicon Valley. And the reason is simple. They are ridiculously fast and incredibly cheap. We're talking up to 40 times cheaper. For a startup watching every penny, how can you possibly ignore that? And the scale of this is just mind-boggling. We're looking at over 540 million downloads of these Chinese open-weight AI models. It's not just little startups either. Big names like Airbnb have come right out and said they've switched over for some of their work because the cost and speed advantage is just too big to pass up. So that brings us to the big takeaway for the week. After all this talk about national security, building walls, and fortifying our digital defenses, it turns out the most disruptive force of all might not be a spy or hacker. It might just be simple economics, which leaves us with a pretty provocative question to chew on. In this global tech race, are all these security walls going to be completely undone by the simple, undeniable power of a bargain? Something to think about. Thanks so much for watching the Roundup. We'll see you next week.